Inside, the air was thin, recycled too many times. The hum of life support was strained and erratic. Each breath came with a faint metallic taste, the telltale sign of filters reaching the end of their usable life. Avera sat curled up in the co-pilot's chair, her eyes half closed, a ration pack untouched in her hands. Beside her, Saren tapped at the controls in slow, deliberate motions, scanning for any hint of a rescue signal. The twins were young by Solari standards, barely out of their second growth cycle, but already seasoned enough to know what it meant to be stranded in deep space. It meant time was their enemy. They had been hauling goods between outer sector colonies when the micrometeor storm struck without warning. The impacts had been like invisible gunfire, tearing through shielding and hull plating in seconds. They'd managed to stabilize the breach and reroute power, but the damage was catastrophic. The stellar drift had bled speed until it was dead in the water. 3 cycles had passed since then. 3 long, freezing, silent cycles. Avera's voice was hoarse when she finally spoke. Any change? Saren shook her head without looking away from the display. Same as before, static, and more static. They had activated the emergency beacon the moment they lost propulsion. It had worked for a short time before power reserves forced them to downgrade to minimal signal strength. Out here, between trade routes and patrol lanes, the odds of anyone even passing close enough to hear it were slim. Avera's hands tightened around the ration pack. Do you think anyone's still? The rest of her question was swallowed by the sudden, piercing tone of the comm system. It wasn't their beacon. It was an incoming hail. Saren's hands moved quickly, patching the signal through. A voice, rough-edged but steady, filled the cabin. This is Callan Voss aboard the Wanderlight. I'm reading your transponder. You're in trouble. Avera blinked, caught between disbelief and relief. Yes, our engine's down, life support failing. Can you say no more? The human voice cut in. Hold position. I'm coming into dock. Within minutes, the shadow of another ship loomed outside their viewport. The Wanderlight was no military cruiser. Its hull was patched with mismatched plating, the paint worn down in places to bare metal. But its docking maneuvers were precise, confident, the movements of a pilot who knew their ship like a second skin. The airlock cycled, and a tall, broad-shouldered human stepped through, wearing a worn flight suit with the chest zipper halfway down. His brown hair was messy from hours in a helmet, and his eyes, an alert, sharp blue, swept over the sisters in an instant, assessing their condition as much as their ship's. You're alive, he said simply, as if that were the first and most important piece of news to confirm. Without waiting for ceremony, Callan pulled a small toolkit from his belt and moved to the nearest maintenance hatch. Your life support's hanging by a thread, he muttered, prying open a panel. I can fix it. Engines too, maybe. Sit tight. The twins exchanged a glance, unsure of whether to follow or give him space. They decided to follow. What they saw was unlike any repair work they had witnessed. Callan moved fast, but not carelessly. Every cut of a wire, every twist of a wrench was deliberate. His hands were steady even when sparks sprayed against his gloves. He cursed under his breath at the shoddy wiring, but grinned when a system flickered back to life. Hours passed. The sisters began handing him tools before he asked, understanding his rhythm without needing explanation. He didn't stop to eat or rest. His focus was unbroken. Finally, after 12 relentless hours, Callan leaned back from the final console and exhaled. Engines will give you 40% thrust. Life support stable. You'll make it to the nearest dock. Avera stared at him, her voice soft. You came all this way for strangers. Callan just shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow. You sent a signal. I was close. Figured I should answer it. Saren looked at him with a quiet intensity. She didn't say anything then, but something in her gaze suggested that this meeting was far from over. Avera gripped the controls with care, guiding the ship away from the empty void and toward the faint signal of a nearby docking station. Saren worked at navigation, her long fingers flying over the holographic display as she plotted a slow but safe route. Callan had insisted on coming aboard for the trip, claiming it was to make sure nothing catches fire. The truth was, he didn't trust a patch job to hold without keeping an eye on it himself. Avera glanced at him between adjustments to the throttle. Do all humans repair ships like that? No schematics, no calibrators, just tools and stubbornness? Callan smirked, leaning back. Most humans I know fix things with duct tape, swearing, and a little bit of luck. But yeah, when you've been out here long enough, you learn to improvise. Plans don't always survive first contact with reality. Saren, who had been unusually quiet since he'd boarded, finally spoke without looking at him. You risked your own ship to dock with ours. That storm could have damaged you too. Why? His tone was casual, but his words carried weight. Because if I were stranded out here, I'd want someone to do the same. Space is big, cold, and empty enough without people turning their backs on each other. The twins fell silent at that. In Solari culture, help was rarely free. Favors had value, debts had weight, and strangers were not to be trusted without careful negotiation. Yet here was a human who had risked his life and resources for no gain at all. The idea was both alien and strangely comforting. Hours passed in that steady rhythm. Callan moved between systems, checking his jury-rigged fixes, adjusting the stabilizers manually when they drifted off balance. Every so often he'd give Avera a thumbs up or tap a gauge, his easy confidence making the cramped, damaged ship feel a little less fragile. Avera found herself watching the way he worked, not just his efficiency, but the way his eyes lit with focus when a problem challenged him. He didn't rush out of panic, nor drag his feet to buy time. Everything he did seemed to follow one unspoken rule: get them home alive. Saren watched too, though more subtly. She noticed the small details, the faint scar above his right eyebrow, the calluses on his fingers from years of handling tools, the way his voice dropped slightly when he gave instructions, as if he wanted to avoid adding stress to the air. Already thick with it, when they crossed into the safe range of the station's comms array, the automated docking request pinged back almost immediately. Callan gave a satisfied nod. You're in the clear now. The dock crew will handle the rest once we're moored. The words should have been a relief, but to the twins they carried an unexpected sting. At the airlock, Callan slung his small kit over his shoulder and turned toward his own ship. You're safe from here on out, he said simply. Take care of yourselves. Neither Avera nor Saren moved. They looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them, and then they turned to him in unison. You can't just leave, Avera said, her voice steadier than she felt. Callan arched a brow. Why not? My job here's done. Saren's voice was quieter but somehow firmer. Because we don't want this to be the last time we see you. He opened his mouth to reply, but Avera stepped closer. You didn't just fix our ship, you changed something for us. You reminded us that not everyone looks at another being and sees a transaction. Saren added, in our world, kindness like that is rare, maybe too rare to let drift away into the dark again. Callan hesitated, caught off guard by the intensity in their words. He had been ready for a simple thank you, maybe a small token of gratitude, not this. Then Saren said it, the words landing with quiet precision. Stay with us. There was no plea in her tone, no desperation, just an invitation, and the faintest edge of hope. Callan's reply stuck somewhere in his throat. He glanced between them, reading the sincerity in their expressions. And for the first time since boarding, the human engineer found himself uncertain about his next step. Callan didn't move right away. He had been ready to turn, step back onto the Wanderlight, and slip away into the cold lanes of space like he always did. But the words hung there, "Stay with us," as if the airlock's atmosphere had thickened around him. He turned slowly to face them, trying to keep his tone light. "Stay? Why?" Avera's silver-flecked eyes locked onto his, unwavering. "Because you didn't just save our ship. You reminded us that not everyone treats life like a bargaining chip." Her sister stepped closer, her voice low but steady. "In our world, nothing is free. Help always comes with a price, even from family. You came with nothing to gain. You docked with a damaged ship in hostile space, risking your own hull. And then you stayed until we were safe." Callan shook his head slightly, searching for a way to deflect. "I've got my own contracts, work lined up. I'm not really—" Saren cut him off, her gaze sharper now. "We're not asking for your work, Callan. We're asking for your heart." The words landed with a quiet finality. Callan actually laughed, not mocking, but in sheer disbelief. "You don't even know me. We've spent less than 3 days together." Avera tilted, her head, a faint smile touching her lips. "We know enough. You came when no one else did. You stayed until we were safe. You cared without reason. That's more than most lifetimes will ever give us." He opened his mouth to argue, but the usual walls he put up in moments like this felt weaker than normal. He had spent years in the void avoiding attachments, drifting from job to job, never tying himself down to anyone or anything. Not because he didn't want connection, but because he'd seen too many faces fade into memory, too many goodbyes spoken over comes that would never light up again. "Do you even understand what you're asking?" he said finally. "If I stay, I'm part of your world. I'm not just fixing things and walking away. That's a lot." Saren's expression softened just slightly. "It is a lot, but we're not asking lightly. We've met traitors who smiled as they robbed us. Soldiers who swore to protect us, then abandoned us when trouble came. Friends who only stayed while we had something to give them. You're different. Different enough to hand over my heart?" Callan asked with a half smile, trying to keep the mood from slipping into something too heavy. "Yes." Avera answered without hesitation. Silence stretched between them, the hum of the repaired systems filling the space. The airlock's small viewport framed the endless stars. Outside stars Callan had always chased without ever finding somewhere he truly belonged. He could feel both pairs of eyes on him, and something in the way they looked at him was disarming. It wasn't desperation, and it wasn't infatuation born from relief. It was a calm certainty, like they had already decided this was where their paths would converge. Callan leaned against the frame of the airlock, crossing his arms. "You know, humans have a saying, 'Don't make decisions in the middle of a storm.'" Avera gave a faint shrug. "We've been in storms our whole lives. That doesn't mean we don't know when the right harbor appears." He huffed out a small laugh despite himself. "That's dangerously poetic." "Truth often is," Saren replied. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Callan could have turned, walked back to his ship, and been gone in minutes. That was the easy option, the one he had taken 100 times before with other faces, other voices. But this time, the thought didn't feel right. He could feel the weight of their request pressing against the old, self-imposed rules that had kept him alone all these years. Rules like don't get attached, don't stay in one place, don't give anyone the power to hurt you by missing you when you're gone. Yet somehow, standing there in the narrow space between two ships with the hum of patched engines around them, Callan found himself wondering what it would be like to ignore those rules. Finally, he exhaled slowly. "You're asking a man who's always moving to drop anchor. That's not something I decide in a heartbeat." Avera's smile was patient. Then take your time. We're not going anywhere, not without you. Her words lingered even after they turned to tend to the ship's final checks. Callan watched them work, the thought repeating in his head like a slow, steady pulse. Not without you. Officially, he told himself it was because the stellar drift still needed observation before he could trust his patch jobs to survive a longer run. Unofficially, he knew that wasn't the truth. The twins had asked for his heart, and instead of shutting the airlock behind him, he'd found reasons to linger. The docking station was a modest outpost, not the sprawling trade hubs of the inner systems, but the kind of place where you could get your hull welded, your tanks refilled, and maybe hear some half-true rumors about pirate activity. Its ring-shaped promenade smelled faintly of recycled air and spice from a dozen food stalls. Callan spent the first day moving between the stellar drift and his own ship, checking readouts, recalibrating power flow, and tightening bolts that didn't strictly need tightening. Every time he thought about slipping away quietly, something pulled him back, usually the sound of Avera's laugh or the way Saren's voice softened when she called his name from across the bay. That night, they invited him to share a meal. In the drift's galley, Silari cooking was fragrant, with colors more vivid than most human dishes. Avera placed a steaming bowl in front of him. Silari leaf stew. Don't ask what's in it, just eat. He tried it, and his eyebrows shot up. That's actually good. Saren smirked faintly. We'll take that as the highest human compliment. The meal was warm, the conversation warmer. They spoke of their homeworld's coral cities, the way Silari children raced each other through bioluminescent tunnels at night. In turn, Callan told them about his childhood on a shipyard moon where the stars were just another backdrop for the sound of welding torches and the smell of oil dot, but beneath the easy laughter, his thoughts kept circling back to their request. Next day, Callan found himself alone on the drift, replacing a cracked conduit in the engine room. His hands worked automatically, but his mind wasn't on the job. Staying meant breaking a pattern he'd lived by for over a decade. In his world, attachments were risks. Crews got scattered, stations fell silent, and promises were too often broken by the vacuum between stars. He had buried too many people in space, and yet there was something in the twins' certainty that unsettled him. They weren't begging. They weren't clinging out of fear. They were simply saying, "You have a place here if you want it." That night, Avera appeared at his workbench with a mug of something steaming and green. "Silari leaf tea," she said, setting it down beside him. "It's supposed to calm the mind." Callan eyed it suspiciously before taking a sip. The flavor was sharp at first, then mellowed into something earthy. Avera leaned against the bulkhead, watching him. "If you leave, we'll understand. But we'll remember you every day. That's the trouble with humans, isn't it? You leave marks on people." Before he could answer, Saren's voice came from the doorway. "You've already given us a reason to hope again. Maybe let us give you a reason to stay." The words hit harder than either of them probably realized. Callan didn't know how to reply, so he didn't. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was heavy, but in a way that felt like the space before a decision. The next morning, Callan walked the promenade alone. The station's windows opened out to the infinite black, stars burning steady against it. He imagined sailing back into that black, no voices waiting for him on the come, no laughter in the galley, no reason to look forward to the next port. The truth settled in his chest like a slow, inevitable weight. For the first time in years, the idea of leaving felt wrong. When he returned to the drift that evening, Avera and Saren were working side by side at the helm. They looked up when he entered, not with expectation, just quiet acknowledgement, as if they were letting him decide without pressure. The Lunara's grace drifted silently under the veil of the asteroid belt, hidden from the Predaxis patrols that still searched for them. Inside, the corridors that had once echoed with the hiss of venting coolant and the groan of stressed metal now rang with a different kind of sound-soft laughter. It was rare aboard the ship, but ever since Rowan had worked his engineering miracles, the twins had been more openly alive. Yet Rowan knew this peace was borrowed time. The Predaxis wouldn't stop. If they found the Lunara's grace, the crew would be annihilated. And as much as he had begun to care for the two alien women, he had no reason to stay beyond the crisis. His shuttle, now repaired and refueled, waited for him in the hangar. That thought should have brought him relief. Instead, it left him with a strange hollowness. When Lyra came to find him, she was unusually hesitant. Her antennae, usually poised and precise, shifted uncertainly. "Rowan," she said softly, "you're leaving soon." He paused his work, setting down the plasma welder. "That was the plan," he admitted, forcing a neutral tone. "You don't need me anymore. The ship's running better than ever. And besides," he gave a faint smile, "I don't exactly belong here." Her lips pressed together as if holding back words. "You belong more than you think." She left before he could answer, her tail flicking once in the air, a movement he'd learned meant frustration. Later, in the galley, Syrah approached. She was the more direct of the two, her eyes burning like twin silver moons. "We've been talking, Lyra and I, about you." Rowan raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" She ignored his attempt at humor. "When you came aboard, we thought you were just another human mercenary. But you stayed up for 42 hours straight to fix our core, even when you were shaking from exhaustion. You didn't have to. You could have left. That's just what engineers do," he said awkwardly. Syrah shook her head. "No, that's what you do." She leaned in slightly. "We don't want you to just leave. We want you to stay." Her words hit him like a pulse blast. "Stay?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Yes, not just as a crew member, as something more." She hesitated, and for the first time since he'd met her, Syrah looked uncertain. "We're twins, Rowan. We think and feel in ways most species don't understand. But both of us," her voice softened, "want your heart." Rowan stared at her, stunned. He had faced reactor meltdowns, pirate ambushes, and storms on uncharted worlds. None of it had prepared him for this. "You're serious," he said finally. Syrah's tail flicked, this time in patience. "Deadly serious. We know human customs are different. And if this is not what you want, you can leave now. But understand Predaxis. Space is dangerous. You won't find safety easily." Rowan didn't answer right away. His mind churned about the ship, about the galaxy beyond, about his own drifting life. He had always moved from one job to another, never staying long enough to be part of anything. And here were these two alien women, so different, yet bound by an unshakable connection, offering him a place not just in their crew, but in their lives. Later that night, he stood in the observation deck, staring at the distant swirl of a nebula. He didn't hear them enter, but somehow he knew it was both of them. Lyra stood to his left, Syrah to his right. Neither spoke for a long moment. Finally, Rowan turned toward them. "If I stay, it won't be as an engineer alone. I don't know what the future looks like, but I'm willing to try." Lyra's eyes softened, her hand brushing his. Syrah's lips curved in something between a smile and a smirk. "You'll find," Syrah murmured, "we're worth staying for." Outside, the stars burned quietly, unaware that somewhere aboard a repaired ship, a human had just chosen to anchor his heart in the most unexpected place in the galaxy. And in the quiet, the twins shared a look, a silent, wordless promise. He wasn't just staying. He was theirs.